Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. I am joined here today by none other than Brian Linhoff. Brian, thanks very much for being here.
Thanks, Scott, for having me. I'm looking forward to teaching, hopefully showing some people how to do some water drop photography. So Something I picked up during kind of COVID times, and it's a good way to spend an afternoon.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to it. Like I said before, I've got the experience to see some of that in action once or twice, and really looking forward to what you have in store for us. I want to go ahead and thank our sponsors for this event, Sigma. Thank you very much for getting Brian in front of us today. For everybody joining us here on Zoom, feel free to drop any questions you have in the Q&A link. For those of us on Facebook and live stream, drop a comment or a question in the comment link below. So I don't want to take up any more of Brian's time. He's got a lot planned and a lot to go over. So Brian, thanks for being here. Sigma, thanks for sponsoring. I'm going to get out of here. Take it away.
So the basic concept behind water drop photography is you drop of water in a bowl or whatever, and you capture that. It creates very interesting abstract images. There's a lot of different kind of like techniques you can use. So the main idea behind what I'm going to show you guys today is trying to use everyday household objects along with maybe some camera gear you already own or stuff you can pick up that's not very expensive. If you want to spend some more money, I definitely have suggestions for that if you want to take it kind of to like the next level. But the idea here was, when COVID first happened, we were kind of stuck in our houses. We weren't sure how we're getting shipments and stuff. So I was looking for just kind of an outlet or something creative to do with items I just already had around the house. I've always been interested in this type of photography, so I just kind of took a deep dive into it. So let's get started with what we can do. So, you can kind of get like, the first shot is kind of a top-down shot of a water drop, and the second one's kind of a more horizon level. So you kind of can get different aspects. I'll show you guys kind of how to do the two different setups for this. So what do we need to do water drop photography? At least this is what I used, and I would suggest you have, especially if you're just doing it for your first time. There's other items you can use. There's tons of tutorials on here, but this is the items I think are kind of like the must to get started with it. So you need a camera with a flash or an external street light or strobe. It's very, very, very useful for it to have a manual mode. I'll go into more details why that's important in just a little bit. You need a lens that will provide close focus or some type of macro capabilities. I really recommend you actually have a true macro lens that would do 1-to-1. The close focus is much better. You can kind of cheat if you have a lens that does maybe, some closer focus or something like 18-300 or 1-400 can get focused pretty closely, but they're not true macro lenses. It's helpful if you have a high megapixel camera, like say like a Sony A7R with like 41 or 61 megapixels. Those type of cameras allow you to do a lot of cropping and post to kind of replicate that macro, but nothing really replaces having a dedicated macro lens for this. A tripod is an absolute must. You need something to stabilize the camera and to be able to set it in position. Water, pretty simple. As a way to drop to have the drops, I use a plaster zipper bag, and I'll show you how to use that. You can use things like a water dropper or other items, but I found like kind of the zipper bag is the kind of easiest to use, hands-free setup, in my opinion. You need a needle to poke a hole in the bag, something to take the bag up to, and then some type of stand to tape the bag on. All this will make a little bit more sense when I get my diagram up and you guys can kind of see what's going on. And then you need some type of item that you can focus on while you're setting up your shot. And this is the absolute most important part is patience. Water drop photography, you might take 15 shots and get 2 keepers, or you might take 100 shots and get 5 you really like, because unless you're using some expensive equipment, a lot of it's just kind of luck of the draw timing and just kind of taking a lot of shots. Luckily enough, we're shooting digitally, so you can take 100 shots and take the 5 keepers and move on with life. Also, it is taking a little bit of time to keep on doing it. So Common questions I get about the two more expensive items that you're going to use is what exact lenses do you guys are using in the shots and what type of flashes. Um, you know, I've taken water drop photos with all three of our macro lenses. So we have a 105 macro that's designed for like DSLRs, like Canon EF and Nikon F mount. We do have a 70 macro that's part of our art lineup, and that's for Canon EF mount and Sony E mount. And then we have a 105 DGDN macro, which is one of our newest ones as part of our art lineup, and that's specifically designed for mirrorless cameras. It's pretty stunning. And then for flashes, you can use pretty much any basic flash to get you started. If your camera has a pop-up flash, that will work. It's not the best, but if you have any type of speed light that you can control off camera, that's a huge bonus, because then we can move the light around and get a little bit more creative with the way we light our subject. You know, though I just got a hold of like 2 weeks ago an FJ80 from Westcott. It's a little bit more powerful flash, and it has this amazing thing called freeze motion that works great at freezing the water drops in place without having to like really fiddle with your controls or anything. So if you wanted to kind of like take it to the next level, something like that would be my recommendation. So what do we have here? So we got a tub to put the water in. I got my tripod, a couple cameras, plastic bags, speed light. I have a light stand, and then I have all my daughter's messy toys because this is my auxiliary room where my daughter and wife let me kind of do crazy photo stuff. So kind of to see it set up. So I've taken a light stand, and at the time I needed some way to create a pole or something to go across to attach my water bag to. So here's my kind of setup right now. Really, if you can, anything you can set up that will allow you to suspend the bag over the top of your container that will catch the water drops. This is just kind of what I had on hand. It was you know, I'm like, what do I have? I'm like, well, I have an umbrella. If I push the umbrella all the way over, it'll let me set it on my tabletop, and it'll let the water drops drop into the pan. So this is just kind of me using what I have available to make this happen. I've seen people attach a bag to a cabinet and, you know, just open the cabinet door a little bit and have the water drop into like a kitchen. You just gotta have to be a little bit creative on this. It doesn't have to be, you know, you just don't want to make sure it doesn't fall over like I knocked it over once or twice. So you need a needle, and this is kind of like the key here is you want to take the needle and kind of just poke a small hole in the bag, and that's going to create a slow drip, and that drip is going to once everything settles and everything, it's going to consistently drop in the same spot. So instead of having some more expensive like water dropper, which you can get and they're awesome, and they let you do some really crazy cool water drop photography, but that can also be expensive. And if it's just for like a single thing, it's sometimes hard to justify that expense if you're just doing this occasionally on the weekends, once or twice a year. So to me, using the water bag is an incredibly cheap and easy way to get started to see if you like it. And then if you do like it, you can move up and try those harder, or invest in some equipment to make it a little bit easier and create a little bit more dramatic shots too. So all you need to do is suspend it over some basic type of pan like this. This is kind of your kind of most basic setup. You'll see the drops falling in there, creating the ripples. And our job is to take photos of those drops and freeze them in motion. So I explained earlier you needed something to grab focus. So I have this like little metal tripod. And what I do is I move it around in my basin or my catch thing so that the water drops are hitting right on top of that head, and that allows me to grab focus. So one of the keys to this is your camera is not going to have time to autofocus, so you need to preset your focus to know where those drops are dropping at all the time. So I use this type of setup to set up my focus so it's pre-focused. One of my favorite tips, so this is, I have my Sony set up here, you know, and I've magnified the back screen about 5 times so I can really grab focus and I know I'm nailing focus. And so the drops are dropping at that spot every time. I use the the screw to grab my focus, then I just put it on manual focus, and I know that all my shots are going to be dropping right there, so I don't have to worry about focus anymore. Kind of an idea of how I'm grabbing focus right there. Well, here's another setup just to kind of give you a little more advanced setup. This is the setup I've been using lately. Is I switched to my dining room, but I have like a 2-stage system. The first system allows you just pretty much to get those top-down shots. If you use like a container within a container, it allows you to get those like kind of horizon shots. And I've used some other different materials and liquids in here to kind of do this. And I've just set up like in the back, I just took a box and wrapped some tissue paper around it to provide a background. As you notice, I'm still using the same umbrella and bag system to create those drops. But what it allows me to get is some different shots. So this is kind of to talk about focus and how things go. As we're shooting, you always want to do some kind of like test shots because you think you get focus when you look at the back of the camera, but when you're going through, you can obviously tell this is just ever so slightly out of focus, and you're thinking you're going to get the best shot ever, but then when you go and look at it on your bigger screen, you missed it. So as you're starting to take some shots, getting your focus set is one of the key things. So this is kind of like that horizon shot. And one of the things here is part of the image is in focus, but I use a particularly shallow depth of field on this, and I don't think I realized it at the time. And so a lot of the front and background are not in focus. I should have probably been at like f11 on this to have the whole water drop in focus, but I actually was at like 2.8. So, I mean, that could create a cool look, but this would actually look a lot better if everything was in focus. We'll go over settings a little bit in a minute. And here's another example of my focus was just off a little bit, and what was going to probably be a super cool shot. It's just a little bit blurry now, and it's just like, So it takes patience because you're gonna take shots like this, and you think it's going to be like, oh, you look at the back of the camera, and you think it's going to look amazing, but it didn't turn out quite right. So, and then every once in a while you get something like this, and you're like, oh, that looks great. But then I realized my background is shooting through the water drop and getting that background, but the background behind it is actually pretty busy. So these are all just kind of like different things I tried when I was shooting, and they were going to require adjustments as you go. This is kind of along the lines of patience. So I nailed focus, but then when I went and got the shot, I find some people might like the background. It's just wrapping paper I threw on there, but I find it to be very distracting. So idea is you're gonna have to like continually try stuff to bring to fruition, and then you can finally nail the shot like this. So I'm shooting a horizon. We're actually getting a little bit of the drop behind it. We're getting the splash. It looks pretty awesome. And then when you get this shot, you're super happy. And that's probably 1 out of 30 shots. So let's talk a little bit about camera settings and the actual how we're going to go about setting the cameras up to make sure we get good results. You want to be in manual mode. Typically, you're going to set your autofocus to manual, what I talked about a little bit before. You're going to set your shutter speed to whatever the flashing speed of your camera is. Most cameras have anywhere between 1/200th of a second to 1/250th of a second. Every camera varies a little bit. But when we're in manual, and some cameras will just lock that in for you when you tell it you're going to use the flash. Sometimes if you're using a complete manual flash, it'll let you go faster than that. So you can just Google whatever the flash speed is for your camera, and you can set that. Aperture, this is something you gotta have to play with. But you're higher the aperture, so say f8 to f16 is better, because as we focus closer, we have less depth of field, so we need a larger aperture to give us more depth of field. So like on that shot a couple images ago, I nailed focus, but my depth of field was so small that the front of the water drop and the back of the water drop weren't in focus. So if I had been at, say, f11, f12, I would have probably gotten that whole shot in focus instead of just those little parts of it in focus. For ISO, I suggest going the lowest you can go to get a good image. We're using flash, so I always go around 100 or 200. If for whatever reason you don't feel like you're getting enough light, you can always up your ISO, but I always start at 100, take a couple test shots and see where I'm at, and adjust accordingly. You had your flash on. Typically what I talked about earlier is you want to dial down the power of your flash. So what happens with flash is when you shoot at a full power, it has this very long burst of light, and that long burst can actually create a little bit more of a blurry image. So what's actually freezing the water drops is a quick, sharp burst of light that's capturing that image. So what we want to do is to turn the power of your flash down so that burst of light is quick and fast, so it actually freezes the motion of the water drop better. One of the nice things about the Westcap flash I was talking about earlier, they have this like freeze motion mode, and it's specifically designed to do things like that, so you don't actually have to do any work. It makes you a little bit lazy, but it's pretty awesome. You just dial it down, you just put it in that mode, and the way the flash fires, it fixes that. But if any other speed light you can kind of do this with, you just turn the power of the flash down. If you're using the pop-up flash on your camera, you can go into the settings and turn the power of the flash down there and create the same effect. And that's kind of what I'm talking about with your speed lights. I was at a lot of times in like 1/128th power, and then I'll adjust accordingly. And we talked about manual focus, which is super important. And then optional, it's super helpful. It's very helpful is to have a trigger release for your camera. You can just buy a simple trigger release that plugs into your camera, so you don't have to hit the shutter button on top of your camera while you're shooting. You can be moving around, firing it. I tend to like to hand hold my flashes, so I'll hold the flash, fire it, and as I'm firing, I'll move the flash around to create different looks. So here's a kind of a couple different examples. So, on this flash here, I have the power turned down to 1/128th of a second for that, so it's a lot less power. And then say on the back of my 7D over here, I've turned down the pop-up flash to -1 1/3. So we're giving it a much shorter burst of light that allows us to freeze motion. So here's an example. Just a super cool shot. Kind of horizon level, kind of getting the wake in there. So I've talked about pretty much just using straight up water for your effects. So there's other things you can add to adjust and create different effects. So you can color the type of light that your flash is firing by using a gel in front of it. So you can shoot blue light, red light, and obviously if you're shooting clear water, it's going to affect the color of the drop. If you don't have gels, and if you just go in your pantry, you can use watercolor, just water, food dye, and you can change the color of the water you're dropping. Glycerin or xanthan gum is another item you can use to thicken the water. The glycerin is just used to kind of like thicken, and it has more viscosity, so you get these bigger drops. And actually, my new favorite thing to use is milk. Don't let it set out for hours and hours, or your wife might get mad at you because of a certain smell that might come off of it. But I wouldn't know that from personal experience. But the milk is tends to be thicker without having to add anything else, and it's more opaque, so that you just get a different look. And I have a couple of shots of that to kind of show off that effect. So in this setup, you'll notice that the water is a lot more milky because I had used milk in the water bag, and I was dropping it. I had dropped some food coloring into the dye, so it created this kind of more opaque look to my shots. So I get something like this. We just caught this, as the milk was dropping in, it actually kind of diffused into the water, but it gave this like really cool opaque look to the drops. And then it just kind of gives a different look and feel to them. You're getting those different looks and feels, like the tissue paper behind it, kind of you can change out very easily and kind of create these looks. And this is one of my favorites. It looks like I think we found a new planet, but it was actually just a water drop, and the motion I caught it. So they have a really different look and feel than some of the actual clear water. Neither one is actually is right or perfect. It's just kind of something to play around and give you a different look and feel to things. So the second part of water drops, and it's not typically what people think of as water drops, but I like to think of them as it's a super cool way to shoot, is I call it static water drops, and I just made that term up. But the water drops aren't moving. So the idea here is actually to use a water drop placed on an object as a lens to create magnification. So on this one, you can see this very little flower. This was shot with our new 105 macro. It creates this like super creative and detailed look. But the background behind there is just completely blurred out. That's actually a flower where the water drop is grabbing that. So kind of like something.
Brian, I am going to jump in and interrupt you. I apologize for my roots, but I guess now we've prompted some questions, which is great. So Buddy's joining us here on Zoom and wants to know, just from your perspective, is there an ideal height at which to drop the actual water from?
So there is not an actual ideal height. I've adjusted. So one reason I like using my light stand is that I can easily raise it and lower it. So I can. If you raise it higher, it's a little bit harder to gauge getting the shot right. So when you're firing, you have more time where you can miss. I do, and maybe I forgot to mention this, I am in like continuous shooting when I shoot, and I just sit there and hold the button and I fire the flash until the flash has no power left. So that's on a basic flash, that's anywhere from like maybe 5 to 10 shots. When it's something like more powerful flash, like the Westcott one, I can do like 20 or 30 shots easily, but it's harder to gauge that time. You're gonna get more missed shots just because there's more time that it drops, but you get bigger splashes because it's gravity falling and more splash. I typically will shoot at like kind of just like maybe at my whatever's like a comfortable height for me, which I'm about 6 feet tall, so the bag's probably about my height. And then I'll lower it, raise it, and just to do different things. So it just gives you a different look and feel. So
awesome. Thank you. And for everybody tuning in, don't forget, get those questions in. We're here to answer.
Yep, and I'm happy to flow back and talk about some other stuff if the questions pop up and make you think about it. So we'll talk about the static water drops, and hopefully that'll bring up some questions about other stuff too. So how do you do this type of shooting? So you need patience. I like to use you can use like a water bottle sprayer that mists an object. So you can take the water bottle and spray something, and as the misting sprays, it'll build up water drops on a subject. I like to put glycerin in that solution so that it's thicker. There's no real perfect solution in that. I've actually used 75% glycerin and just a little bit water. It's something you kind of have to tinker with to kind of get the feel that you want. You really do need a macro lens for this type of work. You cannot get close enough to create that magnifications, and then some patience again. You can do this free-handed. It is a lot easier if you have a tripod set up. You can use autofocus with this, but I do like to grab manual focus on most manual work. So being on a tripod, so you can be at that manual focus. And if you're on that on a tripod, being able to use a cable release, or you want to set your timer up. You want to set if you don't have a cable release, you want to set a timer on your camera, so that if you hit the button to trip the shutter, you want to give it time so that the camera has stopped shaking. So any little bit of movement in this close-up macro, you'll see that. So, and something that's super easy and helps put the water drops on instead of using a water bottle is a syringe or cake tester or straw. I've used a turkey baster just to grab some water and just slowly put water on it. I've also used just like kind of like a cake tester where I dip the water in and just add a little bit of water at a time. You can do the same thing with like a coffee straw. Something not like a big straw is just going to give too much. Like a McDonald's straw is going to give too much water, but like a small little straw will help you. And go through some kind of examples.
Going to the glycerin, Brian.
Sure.
Sorry, going to the glycerin. You know, that's not something you just go to the local shopping store, the supermarket, and pick up, is it?
Yeah, you can.
Where would you recommend getting it from?
You can grab it online, just a quick search of glycerin, and you can find it all over the place. Hobby stores typically have it because they use glycerin to create soaps, like handmade soaps. So a lot of craft stores will have that. You can actually go to drugstores and they'll have it. So like, CVS, Walgreens, those type of places sometimes will have it in stock. But a quick Google search will get you to a place that has it. I think I bought.
There you go. And if all else fails, there's always Amazon, right?
Yeah. I think that's where I got mine, and it was not very expensive. I think I bought it like 2 or 3 times over the course of the last 2 years, just because I always seem to misplace the bottle, and then my wife yells at me because I have 3 bottles in there. So a little goes a long way, but it's not very expensive. So that's the places I recommend if you need it locally, but you can always grab it online pretty simply. So this is me using the cake tester to quickly, so I dip it in there, you kind of have a little on there, since the glycerin's has more of a viscosity, the big word of the day, it just doesn't immediately roll off, so it'll slide down and allow you to place the water drops. I do like that method. I have, like I said, I've used a syringe in the past. I have another shot where I can show you guys where I use the syringe. But you got to be a little bit patient with this. It's kind of like, placing the drops, you'll think you want to I just need that drop to be a little bit bigger. And then you'll put too much on and it'll drop on the table below you. So there's a little bit of patience involved and just, trying to, the preparation is as important as with most things as the actual shooting. Getting it all prepared and set up is actually the hardest part, and then actually hitting the button to get the shot is the easiest part. So, let's go. So, kind of showing one here is I did believe I used a flash on the nope. So the shot on the right, I just did a long shutter speed because we're not freezing any motion here. And since I'm on a tripod, I can just use a long shutter speed to capture the image. The one on the left, I did use a flash. You can see I'm like 1/800th of a second. So you can do it either way. So you don't really have to have a flash for this. It can help. It just creates a different kind of look and feel. But again, I'm using the back view on these to typically grab my critical focus for my framing. I really love using the live view instead of putting your eye up to it, because you can magnify in and you can really nail focus, especially on these macro shots. Well, here's one of my one that's getting there close. I wish I could have gotten a little bit more of the flower in, but I still feel it's a pretty cool shot. And notice how much of an angle it's creating. It's almost like a fisheye lens, the water drop. I'm starting to go here. And one thing is, like, within that water drop, you'll notice that you see my light to the side. So one thing you have to be careful of, and I show it in more detail here, is you have to be careful of what you're placing in the periphery of your shot, because it is so much like a fisheye lens or a super wide angle lens. With that drop, you can grab a lot of things in that shot that you didn't necessarily want to. And I always forget how amazingly sharp this new 105 is. The detail is just insane. So here's another one, and this is to demonstrate that problem again. You guys can obviously see my hand in there. I was holding the flower to try to place it directly in front of the water drop, but you can obviously see my hand in there. So those are kind of like things you got to be careful of when you're shooting. So here's kind of a cool. So this is going to be my next project. So the focus on this is a little bit off, but my next thing I want to do is combine a water drop and a static water drop, because it's a pretty cool look, I think. But if I had like a flower or something behind that, and then within that water drop you caught the flower, I think that'd be super cool. This was actually the wrapping paper I had behind it. This was kind of a happy accident when I realized I could do this, so it inspired me. I mean, the focus is not 100% there, so that's the only thing from keeping this as a super keeper. You know, the little dots in the water drop are there, but the front part of the water drop's a little out of focus. So maybe by the time we come around next week, I'll have some shots to share of my own for the critique of me actually accomplishing that. That'd be cool. And then this is a little bit better, but this is kind of just to demonstrate what that water drop can do as far as like magnifying. So the background's just blown away. I was shooting at a relatively low aperture here of like f4, but the water drop's acting as a magnifying glass and bringing that forward, which is a cool look. And last but not least, this is my best water drop shot ever. I did use a syringe. There was a lot that went into this, so like a day's worth of work of setting it up, figuring it out, and getting the shot. But it is one of the shots I'm most proud of. I ended up using a teleconverter on top of the macro lens to give me even more magnification. When I took the shot, we lived in a house and the floors were kind of squeaky and creaky. And with that much magnification, I would have to set the camera up, set everything up, stand still for like 20 seconds so the camera would stop moving, and then hit the shutter release, and then realize that it wasn't perfect, and then readjust everything, wait some time, take a couple shots. So it was a real work of passion, the shot, but this is the type of thing you can accomplish. Takes some effort, but it's definitely worth it. I think that's kind of it for the main presentation. Any questions I can answer, Scott?
So I did want to kind of touch on the fact Raphael actually didn't have a question, but he did have a suggestion for anybody who's listening. And if you're thinking about participating in the critique, he said that you can make non-smelly milk by mixing 1 part Elmer's glue with 2 parts of water. So for anybody who, if you don't want to worry about getting hit in the head with the milk container after leaving it out to spoil, maybe a better option is using the non-smelly milk. 1 part Elmer's glue, 2 parts water. Try it out. Maybe Brian's going to try it out for the critiques. Maybe some of you will try it out for the critiques, and that's pretty readily available. And then just another comment was, I did notice actually a quick little search on the B&H website does show that we don't stock it. We'll special order it, but we do special order glycerin. So if anybody's looking for it, you could always get it from us. There is a little bit of a lead time on it, but we'll get it for you. We'll call some people.
In case something will show up next week. So So what I want to do next is I want to kind of share kind of some editing tips. I mean, the nice thing about these is, especially the basic water drop stuff, is I typically shoot them raw, so I have the most flexibility. But these are abstract images, so there's no right or wrong way to really edit these. So, this is from a session the other day when I was shooting. So we'll go through. These are kind of some test shots. They were super flat and kind of boring, but these are kind of a couple test shots I was doing at the beginning just to make sure I hit things right. And then when we move to this guy here, and one of the things here is if we go to the basic color on this as it was shot was just like the shots before. So it's just kind of this plain kind of neutral water. I didn't have any water coloring in the shot itself. But by shooting raw, an easy way to kind of like color it and give a certain look and feel to it is just to play with your white balance. So you can kind of take this any which way you like. It's a very simple way to add some different look and feel to the image without having to do much of anything. I mean, I'm just pulling 2 sliders right there to kind of create, to me, a much more dynamic image. And maybe your exposure was a little off, so obviously we can pull it up or down. I mean, there's no right or wrong with this. It's not like we're shooting skin tones and we're like, oh, they look jaundice, or they look a little green, so we have to, what our eyes is there to see. I can even turn something black and white. Don't necessarily love the way this turned out, but I was just playing around. So let's see. So like this image here, was kind of just plain and simple, but when we added a little bit of color to it, it just really popped it out and gave it a lot more look and feel. And as you're going along and shooting, just grabbing a couple sliders. If you want to get super creative, if you can start going down into the split toning, your hue and saturation, you can start doing some cool things, and just targeting shadow color and things like that with your look and feel. And you can vastly change the look and feel of the image just by, my favorite thing in the world is, I'm not a huge editor, but I love me some sliders, so to say. So being able to just kind of, I just kind of dial in the image on what's pleasing to me. So that's all that really matters. So kind of flip through a couple of these. You guys can kind of see some of the process involved. This is one, you thought was a keeper. And even when I was pulling him in the Lightroom, I thought, oh, that might be good. And then when I pulled it up on a bigger screen, it was still pretty blurry. So even shots you think you're going to get, they don't always turn out. So, this would have been awesome if I had actually an upsplash on it. Getting that kind of picture-in-picture I showed earlier. And then we'll move along.
Just going back to the photo that you had shown previously before we jumped into Lightroom with the flower. Buddy was asking about how close is the background flower to that water drop.
It's actually, so the flower there is actually, if I remember right, it is actually further away than you think it is. What I had to do is, so I set the stem up and put all the water drops on it, and then I had probably about 6 feet from there to the wall behind me, and I had this like long table that it was on, and I basically just moved the flower back and forth until it like filled the water drop. If I remember correctly, I was probably about 2 feet away. I'll admit I took the shot maybe about 2 years ago, so 100% of how I did it is a little bit lost. I found that I've forgotten many of things over the last year and a half. But the best way to kind of set that up is to set your water drop, if you have the space, is to set your water drops up and then move your subject around so that they're filling that space. A lot of people will do these out in nature and shoot water drops through a branch of something that's already sitting outside. And those people amaze me. They have the patience and time to do that. But this is all within a controlled environment, so there's no wind or anything knocking the drops off. So hopefully that helps. So when we move down to some of the kind of more the milk shots, like I said, I'm gonna have to totally steal that Elmer. So as we're shooting this, my focus, I don't know what happened. I thought I had everything dialed in really good, but my focus is off a little bit on some of these, as you can see, as we're moving through them. But you can see this is without any color change or anything. This kind of milky feel gives a much more a different look and feel to it. So I'm hoping to, experiment with different, fluids and different ways they react. It all kind of gives you a different look and feel to things, which is pretty cool. And so then we'll move over to the kind of this shot, which has these kind of crazy colors. And again, all I did on this was just kind of drag my sliders around. This is kind of what it was like originally. And as I added, just kind of created that kind of surreal, bright, I don't know, almost 80s look to me. I don't know, for some reason it has like an 80s feel to me. But that is basically it, guys. Any questions?
Awesome. So you mentioned you kind of went the we'll call it the smart way, not the smart way, but the affordable way of using creating water droplets. Have you ever played around with? I know there's some products that we sell on the site that will allow you to sort of control how fast the droplets are coming, and being able to Bluetooth and control them through it. Have you ever really played around with that at all? What's your take on those?
They are amazing. They just cost, it's to me, this is something I kind of do every once in a while. And the idea here is to kind of give somebody new ways to explore and try things out. You can find a ton of tutorials online that will talk to you about how awesome the water drops are using that type of system. And they really are, because you can control like how many drops you are. You can get like drops hitting each other, so you get these colliding, and it's super awesome. But most of those machines, they run anywhere from $200 to $500, and I think they're awesome. And I think they're great. If it's something you want to kind of like dig into, I think it's definitely worth the purchase. You can do what I did much easier, because you know exactly where those drops are. You can control how much is going to be there, you control how much is coming out, all those type of things to create some super cool shots. This is the whet your appetite to get you kind of started, to make you think, oh, I like this stuff. Let's spend some more money with B&H.
Yeah, there you go. I'm just trying to get people to come to B&H's website and spend more money. I have the same problem too. So anybody at home listening, don't feel bad. I work here, so you can imagine what restraint I have to show every single day, every single announcement. It's definitely a difficult life.
Yeah, you guys make it too easy to get things. How dare you?
too easy to get into trouble. Also, so we had a few questions coming in asking about just the water droplets themselves as they're splashing and things like that. Do you wind up running into an issue of the water splashing the lens, hitting the lens? Is there a way to kind of make sure that that's prevented, or are you just shooting from such a far distance that's kind of a limit?
No, it is a problem. The lenses like a typical splash is not that, it's not that major of a deal, but I do keep like a microfiber cloth around. You have to worry about it more is if you raise the dropper higher and you get bigger splashes, then it becomes a little bit more of an issue. On some of my images I was going through, and I did notice that there must have been a little splash on the water, because I can see little spots in the images, and I just clone those out with a simple, just in Lightroom to get rid of like the dust look. But you want to be as close as you can to get the right type of magnification, so you can get a little bit of water on the lens. Like our 105 arts, that they're they're water resistant, so I'm not really worried about it. You just got to make sure keep a cloth handy to keep that front element clean. So,
Brian, I want to thank you very much for being here with us today and sharing some water droplet kind of techniques and tidbits.
Yeah. So hopefully inspire some people. You can try some stuff out. There's a lot of trial and error involved, but it can be a lot of fun. So I'll try to bring some new photos next week too. I still have everything set up, so see what we find. So, sounds good.
Awesome, definitely. So thank you very much, Brian. I want to thank our sponsor, Sigma, again for sponsoring this event and bringing Brian on board here. For everybody else joining in, I want to say thank you very much to you as well. This has been another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. We'll catch you on the next one. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.